are supposed to teach us important knowledge and healthy habits that help us be long-term effective workers and livers in life, right? And although I think this is the best of what schools do try to offer, have you ever thought about the unhealthy habits that get trained into us by the process of school and schooling? I remember my mind being blown when I first learned the phrase hidden curriculum over 15 years ago when I was going through my teacher training. They were asking us to think about what are some of the hidden things that students learn by osmosis, the way the institution of schools are set up, the way they're laid out, the way classrooms are set up, the way curriculum is taught. And ever since then, I've been chewing on this idea also as I watch and as an academic coach and have intimate relationships with students to find out what are they learning that's good and useful for their lives, and what habits and ways of being are they learning that may actually be detrimental to long-term well-being. This is the topic we're going to be talking about today with my colleague and friend, Kelsey Blackwell. I'm super excited that we're going to unpack what it could mean to colonize the body and colonize our minds, and how we in general, and specifically in terms of Kelsey's work, women of color can work to decolonize their bodies, their minds, and their lives. And with that, let's dig in. Kelsey, yay, you're here.
Happy to be here.
So will you tell the world a little bit about what your work in the world is?
Yes. So I am a somatic coach, which means that I work with clients through the body. The clients that I work with are particularly women of color, which is how I self-identify. And the focus of our work is looking at the ways we've internalized systemic oppression. So looking at our internalized oppression and the pathway of unhooking from that through the body. Mm-hmm. So how coming to our body can help us unhook from these patterns that many of us know that we're doing, but don't know how to stop doing. Mm-hmm. So the body can provide information that can indicate new ways of being, new ways of expressing ourselves, new ways of claiming boundaries that, while simple, may not be the patterns that we're in. So we can see that and adjust.
Yeah. That was a lot for folks to take in right now.
Yeah, for sure. Slow me down.
Yeah, no, that was great though. And so let's talk about, well, let me share how I know you first. And then I want to break some of that down, because there's a very specific thing that you and I have talked about in the past that I wanted to do in public that I thought would be so helpful for educators to hear us chat about. But first, I'll say that you and I met each other through an organization and a community arts practice called Interplay. And so we've known each other first and primarily through playing in the same space together, improvisational movement, improvisational storytelling, letting our voices do lots of things, fun things. And so we started there together. And then we've each branched off into our own businesses. And so we've tracked each other through that. I've been in entrepreneurship a little bit longer than you, but it's been so wonderful to both mentor you sometimes and then learn from you more recently as I've been watching your email list. So I really respect the way you bring playfulness, but as well as this really grounded experience of and language of the wisdom of the body into your work. I've referred one woman of color in my program to you, and she had a wonderful experience in your program, which we'll talk about later. So I'm just really thrilled that
Yes.
we can be in this kind of collaboration now.
Yes, me too. Yes. And that piece that you named around play is so important, I think, when we start to work with the body, because oftentimes we can get really serious about this work. Social justice, internalized oppression, it's heavy, right? So it can feel really serious.
Yeah.
And when we're in a place where things are feeling heavy or we're feeling a little stressed, what happens is the body constricts. So it's hard to access the wisdom our bodies are holding when we're in a contraction. So the role of play in the community that we were introduced through really opened the door for me to relating to my body in a different way, because I could see, there's so much information here that I access when I'm in a state of play. And then that led to this deeper inquiry of, okay, well, how do I utilize this for myself and then also for my audience, for the women that I feel called to serve?
And how many cohorts? I mean, well, I know you do private one-to-one coaching, but you also have this group cohort. Is this your second cohort that's starting up?
This is my third.
Your third. Wonderful. Okay, so you have even more data than the last time we talked. You'd only had one cohort.
Yeah.
Even more data from the folks in your room about what they've experienced as far as that oppression is concerned, and
Right.
how to work with transforming it in their bodies.
Yeah, so I'll just share a little bit how I got to offering a program was through working with women one-on-one and seeing like these familiar patterns. And I work just with women of color. So seeing these familiar patterns showing up, and it was like, oh, okay, like here's some themes. What would it be like to develop some curriculum and explore these in a group setting? And so I called the program Decolonizing the Body, because it really feels like what we're working with are the impacts of colonization. So, and inside of colonization, we're talking about white dominance, white supremacy, hierarchically ranking bodies, how we relate to resources, how we relate to time, all of these things, right? So in the program, we look at a different aspect of what can happen in a colonized body. And we explore through play, through poetry, through, dropping in with each other one-on-one in conversation, just different possibilities. Because we still live inside of capitalism, we still live inside of these systems. So I often say this isn't about arriving somewhere so much as it is about deepening our awareness and making choices when we can to embody more freedom. Yeah. It's not always an option we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And you didn't, in that whole list, you didn't mention patriarchy, but I imagine
yes,
that's another oppression, given that it's women of color that you are.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And I would imagine then the very unique ways that capitalism and patriarchy collide in the bodies of women of color, given that white supremacy is the culture that we come from.
Totally. And that's where those themes show up of like, our bodies, like we might have very different stories. We might have very different backgrounds. We might have different relationships to our cultural lineage, but the shaping that we have in our bodies is so similar. And so it's that the similarity of the shaping that points to the pervasiveness of the oppression we're experiencing. Yeah.
And what inspired me when you and I had this conversation after your first cohort. I mean, inspire is the wrong word because it's a positive feeling and it's a hard thing, actually.
Yeah.
But I was inspired that you were seeing it so clearly is the relationship that school and schooling has played in the colonization, to use that word, of the bodies of the women that you've been working with.
Yeah,
That
totally.
would seem over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's so many specific ways. I think school is really important because we enter school when we're so young.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really impacted by our experiences there. But you could also say that any institution that's created inside of systemic oppression is going to replicate those patterns unless it's intentionally focused on not doing so. So what I see is, which you could see in schooling as well as other, a lot of the clients I work with are coming from corporate environments, and it's very similar, but there's a distancing from supporting a connection to the body, connecting to one's intuition. There's a preference on what you can prove, the more linear, cogent ways of streaming together arguments. There is a emphasis on being a good student and fitting into sort of the rules or the hierarchy of the structure. So challenging authority isn't always welcome. And I think about this personally in my own schooling journey, being someone who, as a young body and even in my body today, was feeling a lot in the environment, but none of that was actually spoken to. So for an example of this is, for me, going into math class was terrifying because I just didn't speak the language that was happening in that room. And if what I was feeling in my body could have been validated or even spoke to by a teacher of like, you may be feeling scared, you might be feeling anxious, right? That's okay. Some bodies are really like, this is really their jam. And for other people, it's not, right? But what you're feeling is not valid, right? Like that right. Can be recognized. That would have given me so much more ease. But instead, what happens is that we learn to shave off these aspects of ourselves that don't fit into the paradigm or fit into the structure that we're trying to find belonging in. So we lose access to our feeling self. We lose access to our intuition. We lose access to some of our, wild creativity because of the pressure to get things right. We may even lose access to feeling like it's okay to not know, right? That's a huge aspect of an embodied practice or embodiment, is really being able to navigate from a place of open curiosity and not rushing to a solution. So all of these things are I see in my clients, and because it goes so far back, right? Like wanting to make sure they got the sticker on their exam, or the sort of embrace of feeling like you're really in close with the teacher and knowing how to navigate oneself in order to endear oneself to someone with authority, right? And how that persists as we get older because we learn it so young. And so a lot of the work is like reconnecting with those stories. And so when I work with women and we drop into the body, we are connecting with sensation, which is the language of the body, is sensation. And when we come into feeling sensation, we see what it arises. And oftentimes what arises as we're in that landscape are memories from their childhood, memories from school, memories from, not being heard, right? And so that's the connection, I think, is that we learn it so young, and these systems are present in our schooling systems.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really fair point, that we learn it so young. And then also there's something about schooling that requires, or we have assumed it requires, codification of certain behaviors, of certain knowledge, what is relevant knowledge, quote unquote relevant knowledge, versus not relevant knowledge that should be taught or can't be taught. Curriculum has come a long way in making sure that there are more voices in the room, and yet just layering in a book or two by a woman of color, let's say, into an English class doesn't necessarily fix the fact that for years now, this codification has happened, and then been, what's the word I'm looking for? Like certain things get encoded, and then there's a word I'm missing, but it like happens again and stronger and happens again, reinforced. That's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. And schooling also tends to be, I've noticed, technology wise, at least, just if we're looking at technology, schooling tends to be, I would say, at least 10 years behind where the culture is in terms of the kinds of technologies we're using. So schooling also tends to be somewhat behind where the new voices that our culture is bringing us to help heal some of these wounds can be. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that question of resourcing is a big one, because even just thinking about the schoolroom structure itself.
Yes. Thank you. Let's go there.
Like, what are the environments that we are expecting our children to learn in?
Yeah.
And, when you bring in body awareness, right? If you're not just thinking about what are we putting into their minds, but also like, how are we addressing them, the full individual, then you also are bringing into questions of like, what are these desks like? How are they arranged? What is the lighting in this room like? What are the smells that people are experiencing? What is their relationship to being able to move their body? What is their relationship to being able to take care of their needs when they arise, right? And I feel like that's really an area where there could be, a lot of potential for designing or just thinking about spaces where that's attended to. And it feels to me like what happens is you reach a certain grade, and then that's when it's like, now we're serious, so.
Yeah, now we're serious. Now we have to fold our bodies into the rectangle of chairs stuck underneath tables that are all the same size. They are in elementary school too, but the day and you get out of tables and into more often, and you're moving around. And then middle school, bam, this is what it means to be, like you said, a good student, to be professional, to be a quote unquote good learner. And it really means, like, so if your leg's tapping, or, ignore the needs of your body in order to learn.
That's right. And that can be such a harsh transition to go from an environment. I mean, it's kind of like,
it's incremental.
It's incremental. Exactly. It's incremental. But when you get to whatever grade middle school starts, for me, it was 7th grade. I remember being completely shocked that there was no recess anymore. I remember just being like, And I remember I was like, any moment now we're going to go to recess. And I remember raising my hand and asking like, when is recess? And then this kid was like, what, do you have a plate in your head? There's no recess. I mean, I'll remember that for the rest of my life. And I, first of all, was confused. I was like, what is he talking about? Plate in my head? And then I was like, that surely can't be right, that there's no recess. And then, yeah, lo and behold, it was over. It was over. So yeah, it's a big transition. And I think all of our bodies are so sensitive to our environments, but then when you add, somebody who's naturally got a sensitive, kind of emotionally intelligent, creative disposition, that juxtaposition from, being in the womb of elementary school to junior high is pretty traumatic. And the truth is that our bodies need that kind of space and care and freedom all along. And especially as we get older, right? So,
and it's true for everyone. And especially when you live in a body that has some sort of marginalized relationship to oppression. And so a woman's body, a woman of color's body, it's even more of a constriction because I feel like I'm losing my words now. I'll just say it's even more of a constriction.
Well, right, because you're being forced to abide inside of the classroom, right? And what you get when you open up the space is freedom to be in your body, in a space that feels maybe safer to you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah, the kind of militant, we go from this room to this room, then we have lunch, we stay on camp. I mean, the whole thing it's so structured. And it's not to say that structure isn't, useful. Like, I can certainly see how it works, but it's missing just the awareness of all of these students being embodied beings.
Right. I just recently, meaning this past weekend from when we're recording this, was getting rid of a big bean bag that I have had in my living room. And I posted it on my local Buy Nothing account and on Facebook. And about 10 teachers responded saying, I'd love your bean bag for my classroom. So I just assumed they were elementary school teachers. I did a random drawing, picked the person. She came over to pick it up. And I asked her, like, what do you teach? And she said, oh, I teach 10th graders, 10th grade humanities and history. And I was just like, oh, I'm so happy they get to have a beanbag.
Oh, that's amazing.
In their 10th grade class.
Very encouraging.
It is.
That's great.
It is. Yeah. And I do think more and more classrooms are trying to be creative around paying attention to some bodies' needs, but those are also schools that often have more financial resources. They also happen, generally speaking, to be schools that are pretty mostly white. And so it's a real question around how do we bring the importance of letting bodies be bodies to schools, and then how do we also prioritize resources to go in that direction.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just another short story that's related to this, and it's so relevant to my life. And so listeners listening to this is your little Gretchen update if you're in my world. But so I've been going through braces. I've been going through this whole thing. I might have jaw surgery. I've been going to physical therapy, and I have a personal trainer now. And what I am doing, it turns out, is I am unraveling the damage that has been done across however many years. I'm 48, almost 49 now, by being a body with a long torso and short arms and short legs. And so just this week, my my physical therapist was talking about the impact of having short arms and sitting at tables means you slouch at the table to have your arm, your elbow like touch. And then that slouch there in the back creates a bend in the cervical spine. And then all of this is happening where my legs can't touch the ground. And so that creates a bend in my lumbar spine. And so my whole spine is like backwards. And it's been that way for a while. And then because of all of that, the bone in my jaw has also been worn away. And it's like all because, I mean, it's more complex than I'm about to say, but I also think this is true. It's all because I've had to fold my precious animal body that is beautiful in its own proportions into the standardized setting and schooling, and work. Right? I just got rid of my desk 6 months ago. I was like, I'm no longer going to sit at a desk anymore. I do not need it. I'm going to create a working environment for myself where I have about 10 to 15 different positions I can sit in throughout the day that actually are friendly to my body. And I just have to do that to counteract the 18 years that I sat in desks at schools that didn't fit me. And then all the rest of the time that I sat at desks at jobs.
And could you imagine if you had in your schooling journey seen options for how to receive your learning? Like you can sit, you can stand, you can lay, you can, if that had been opened up earlier, how one might not accept for so many years.
Right.
Discomfort.
Right. And that's it. And there's another thing there about not just having the option, but having been taught how to pay attention to the sensations in my body. And there are emotional sensations sometimes we don't have to even say it's emotional. We have sensations. Sometimes it's literally a joint hurting. Sometimes it's a wriggling sensation in your chest or your belly or whatever. But I actually didn't know what actually anger feels like until I was 30 something, 31, 32. A boyfriend told me, he's like, you're angry. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not. But I had my arms all like, he's like, you're angry. I was like, really? And then I started, is this what anger feels like? And so I just think it's so important what you're doing to help those of us who need it. I mean, we all need it, but those of us who are open to it, to really start paying attention to what our body has been trying to tell us all along, and then to learn how to decode that as a way to decolonize ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for saying that. I think your experience is really indicative of what starts to unfold when we come to feeling our bodies, is that we see how the sensations that we're experiencing are related to so many different aspects of our lives. But making those connections takes time.
Yeah.
So oftentimes when someone comes into this work, they may not even be able to feel the sensations that are happening in their body at all. There may be a sense of like, I know I have a body and I think it would be good to connect to it, but I really feel alienated from everything that's below my neck.
Yeah.
I see this a lot with academics, which you can even see in how, these very learned people walk. It's very head first. Like the head comes and then the body is behind. The body brings them into the room, right? And it's actually okay. I really like to normalize the fact that if your body feels numb or feels like there's not a lot of sensation you can connect with, that is totally normal. It's a really natural adaptation to systemic oppression to shut down sensation. Because when you allow that and you don't actually, there isn't an outlet for what it arises, it can feel unsustainable.
Yeah.
So, and oftentimes we learn how to disconnect or numb ourselves from the neck down pretty early on. So that sense of like, I was uncomfortable, but I don't even know if I was uncomfortable or if I knew at the time, right? Like maybe I could have pinpointed it, but I was so focused on like being a good student or whatever, that I was totally disconnected from that. Is such a common story, and it's okay.
Yeah.
The approach, and this also is something that can feel counter to individuals who've spent a lot of time like moving through a linear progress or process. The approach to beginning to feel the body is one of allowing whatever is happening to be okay.
Even constriction.
Even numbing, even I can't feel anything, even I'm tight, right? And releasing the idea of an end goal. Because when we put that, even that pressure on ourselves, we're problematizing what our body is doing. And oftentimes what our body is doing is an adaptive response that is wise. And B, that additional emphasis on a goal, it's sort of like we're back in the same pattern of the mind. So we're trying to decolonize, but we're relying on our conceptual mind. And it's okay that we do this because it's a pattern that we've been in for so long. And what we do is we just come back over and over again to dropping into feeling, dropping into the breath, doing different movement exercises, noticing what they feel like. What does it feel like when I constrict all my muscles in my face and everything? What does that feel like? Does that remind me of anything? What does it feel like when I let myself feel really, really heavy and lay on the floor? What does it feel like when I press my hand on my chest, right? Like there are ways that we can start to explore sensation in the body by physically moving or manipulating ourselves to bring that sensibility back online.
My mind is going in a million places. So I'm taking a moment to be with my body. And I want to point out that even like one thing that was so helpful for me, I don't even know where it came from, but I thought of it when you were just speaking, is even learning, like, I don't have to actually even take a deep breath if my body doesn't want to take a deep breath. Like to ground in my breath means just to notice, where is my breath right now?
That's right. That's right.
And as soon as I said that, where is my breath right now? I felt my belly naturally by itself take a breath. And that is different than, okay, everyone, let's relax. Let's take a deep breath now.
Yes, totally. The thing that really inspires me in this work is actually, it connects to an essay from Audre Lorde called Uses of the Erotic.
I just read that in the last year and it's on my list to reread.
It's amazing, right?
Yes, it is.
One of the lines from that essay is her discussing how when we let ourselves have what it is that we really, what really satisfies us, when we let ourselves connect with pleasure, when we let ourselves connect with ease or freedom, then it becomes a requirement. We no longer can accept what we were once doing.
Yes.
Right. So just like for you, I used to force myself to sit in these little chairs. And now that I see how much this doesn't serve me, I no longer can accept it. Right. It's like that with all of our embodied practices. It's like we take our time, and what we're doing is we're exploring, we're asking ourselves, what does my body really want? And can I let myself have that?
Yeah.
Right? It's the agency of being in that question over and over and over again. And it never ends.
Yes.
and something new, right? And we can approach that of like, as like, oh, okay, this is my new thing and I'm gonna like be militant about it and da 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 da, right? But when we move into that framework, we lose the body.
Mm-hmm.
The body is always in the present. It's like, okay, and now what? And now what?
Yeah.
And when we start to feel ourselves moving from that place more and more frequently,
Mm-hmm.
then we start to require it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I know what it feels like to say no to that request.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it feels like to let myself have a nap. And even though there are all these pressures externally
Mm-hmm.
that are like, that is a bad choice, you don't deserve that, all those voices,
Mm-hmm.
we start to more and more frequently be guided by our own inner knowing.
Mm-hmm. You saying that made me, so my thought process was, I'm imagining parents listening. There are parents and educators who will be listening to this. I'm imagining parents listening to this going like, oh no, my kid already listens to his or her body too much. Like in terms of maybe a student with ADHD or with distractions or whatever. No, they can't go do that. They have to study or they have to get their homework done. And I imagine a teacher thinking a similar thing. And so where do you think the balance is between learning how to listen to your body and then also following through on responsibilities when sometimes those responsibilities might require that that like a kid is going to have to sit for longer than they want to practice filling out a worksheet or whatever. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So, well, I don't work with children, so I can't say that I'm an expert there.
Yeah.
But with the clients I do work with, many who work in 9-to-5 desk jobs
Mm-hmm.
that require them to, be on camera for most of their day.
Mm-hmm.
What can happen is that it's like the self gets compartmentalized. So there's like, this is like the self I am when I'm at my job, or maybe this is the self I've learned I have to be when I'm at school. And then freedom when I, finally leave, or collapse when I finally leave,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like, how do we integrate both of those selves?
Yeah.
And so I think that the schooling environment could be such a great place to start to lean into what that could look like. So one of the things I suggest for my clients is actually that they take frequent breaks to move their body.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of different practices for this, but one that's super easy that as well is shaking the body out.
Mm-hmm.
Shaking the body out and shaking out the voice, shaking out everything, right?
Well, and I'm going to interrupt you there to be like, we've been sitting for a little while. People who have been listening have been doing whatever. Would you lead me in just a quick 30-second shake out?
Yeah, sure. So shake out one hand, shake out the other hand. So I have to warn you, my dog likes it when I do this. So they jump up and you might hear her.
Yes.
Shake out both hands. Shake out what you're sitting on. Shake out your whole body. Shake out your whole body and your voice.
Okay, I wanted to hear your dog.
Did you hear her?
No, I don't. I see the tail wagging though.
Yeah, she's shaking. She's shaking. It's so great because she recognizes it.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is like being to being, like, oh, we're playing, we're releasing. I get that.
Yeah.
So that practice is like, that could be a practice that you introduce into a classroom.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for that. Because I interrupted you, did you remember where else you were headed?
Well, I think, one thing that I do love about children is that severing from their body intelligence is oftentimes it's less present. So like there still is this like, access to creativity and being in the body. And so if I had a student or a child that was, a really an active body, then maybe I would try to partner with them to find ways in which I'm not making their body intelligence wrong.
Right.
I'm meeting that with, some fulfillment of what would feel good to them.
Yeah.
And also asking or expressing why this other piece is also important. So it's less of this hierarchical relationship and more of a partnership. Yeah. And oftentimes I think children can really show us new practices. Mm-hmm. So, that's the shakeout is one practice, but if you have a really active body, they may have a lot of other ways of moving the body that could inspire movement for others. Mm-hmm. So that's a suggestion.
I had a client early on in my academic coaching career who at one point said to me, "Gretchen, why do you make fun of me all the time?" I said, "I do? Like, how do I do that?" And she said, "Well, you often copy me and you'll do what I'm doing." And this was a time I was also doing a lot of interplay. So I was very, very embodied a lot of the time. And one of our practices, as you know, in interplay is the practice of ecstatic following. And so letting your body go with the energy that is, and the movements that are in the space. And so I was ecstatically following her without realizing it.
Oh, that's so
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
But she didn't know even how to receive that.
She didn't. And so I explained it to her and I said, "Does it make you self-conscious?" And she was at an age, of course, when it does. And I said, "Okay, well, it's coming from a place of delight in me because I just love how you are in the space, how you move your body in this space. And I want to try and see what it's like in my body. But let's check in a little bit and make sure that I do it in a way that feels good to you." And so we worked with it and it was fine. And she grew to know when I did a certain thing that it was a compliment to her, or that
yes.
being seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could just imagine how great it would feel. Because as your podcast listeners likely know, kinesthetic learning is a really prominent way that bodies learn information. So, and I'm a kinesthetic learner myself. And so I can only imagine how good it would feel if I was in a classroom and my teacher was like, "Kelsey, could you invite do a movement that the rest of the class could do?" I'd be like, "Yes, I can do that." And and how validating it would feel for other people to do it. And if that was part of the culture, so it was different people, but instead what we had was math around the world, which was flashcards. And I was like, oh, that was so hard for me.
Right. Totally. Well, and part of the anti-boring approach that I teach is a process of helping students notice what are the needs of the learning right now, the content that I'm needing to learn, what's the need of the learning, and how do I design a study practice or a learning practice for myself that honors the need of the learning, but also honors myself. So if you had only studied math with only embodied movements, you might not have learned math very well, honestly. You might have also needed the flashcards. But how could the flashcards be used in a more embodied way? Or how could you take more embodied breaks? How can you have more of yourself in service of the content that you are also being taught? That's the dance that I try and teach in the anti-boring approach. And I've been thinking of it as a decolonizing practice, but I haven't really unpacked for myself this big word, decolonization. And it's one reason I wanted to show up in conversation with you to get more practiced thinking about that, not being scared of these words that a lot of people might judge as quote woke or quote critical race theory, as if it's a bad thing, and how to really practice seeing all the ways we have been trained in our lives. So I'm grateful to be able to show up to this practice conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'm happy to share more about my understanding of decolonial work, if that's
Well, here's an
where we want to
interesting
lean,
thing.
or
Here's an interesting thing, because I thought about that, and I was actually at the beginning going to ask you to define some terms. And then I thought, what would a conversation between two delightful, smart, already fairly conscious about these things women be like if we didn't need to back up and define these terms? So I wanted to give us space to do that. And then a little earlier, when you used again the phrase, I think, systemic oppression, and we were talking about the breath, and I almost interrupted us to say, hey, listeners, notice, where is your breath right now? Because we're using some words that strike terror into bodies, specifically white bodies, who haven't, I mean, it's not only white bodies, because I know folks of color who I've talked with too when they're coming into their understandings of these terms. So let me actually not racialize it in this moment. But I almost wanted to invite people, just notice, where is your body with these terms that we've been throwing out and not defining and assuming to be true?
Yeah. It's a great inquiry. It's a great way to feel into sensation.
Yeah. And if you notice that when we have talked about these things, you have noticed some constriction, you're holding your breath, or your neck was tight, or something like that, again, we're welcoming anything you notice and asking you to get curious about why might these concepts, I don't even know, what would you say we're inviting them to get curious about? As soon as I said why, I was like, I don't know if that's what we're asking.
Yeah, so I think the question is, how is this impacting me? And what do I know about what I'm experiencing in my body?
Perfect. How is this impacting me, and what do I know?
Yep.
Great.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, this is a familiar sensation, or, I haven't felt this one before, or what is it, what does it bring up? Just staying in the sensation without trying to figure it out or get out of it or pinpoint it on something specific, which is a way that we, again, move back into the mind. Like, gotta, solve this.
Yes.
I don't want to be a person who experiences this sensation. But I really try to normalize it. I think that it's really natural to have any sort of bodily kind of information show up when we start talking about systems of domination, because some of what we're feeling might be kind of our own stories or our own fears around that. And I think also some of what we're feeling is, at least in the United States, what we have yet to address collectively.
Yeah.
And so some of that pressure that we put on ourselves is actually outsized to what our bodies can hold. And we feel it intensely because we don't have larger containers to help us hold it and metabolize it. Yeah. So that's part of the reason that I called these spaces. It was like, we're trying to unhook from things that we really can't do alone. Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think let's not pop back up to the mind and define these things. Maybe we'll have another conversation.
Sure.
With you. I do want to, at the very end, come back with some specific practices for parents, educators, and students. I have a couple in my mind. I didn't warn you I was going to ask for that. So we'll chat about that at the very end. But first, if people are hearing this conversation and moved and thinking, I would like to do this for myself, and you are a woman of color, could you share a little bit more? Maybe share your screen. I know podcasters, you won't be able to see it, but YouTube, you will, and show us what we're in. Well, not me, but show the women of color what is available for them.
Oh, yes, let me share my screen. Yes, so this program is going to start in September, and it's an 8-week program for women of color, where I'm really calling space to be in an intimate collective. So it's not a lot of bodies, no more than 10, to really be in these questions of looking at, feeling our bodies, and then looking at the ways we've been shaped by these systems. The work that I do, I break into 4 focus areas. So the first focus area is remembering, which I hyphenate re-member, which is like coming back into the body and really doing it from this place of pleasure. Like, how can I, like, as I start to feel my body, how can I start to lean into what it might be asking of me? So maybe that's laying down, maybe that's stretching, maybe that's shaking or yawning, but starting to come into the body and feel sensation and then address sensation. Then the next piece is reclaiming. So as we start to feel our body, we start to feel for the places that ache or the places that constrict. And we get curious about where that constriction was learned and how we learn to minimize ourselves or hold ourselves in order to protect our belonging or protect our dignity or protect our worth. And then we reclaim that aspect of ourselves by trying on a new pattern that allows us to have our dignity and our worth and our safety all at the same time. So what often happens is we learn a constriction to protect one of those qualities, but we sacrifice another one. So it's like, in order to be safe, I have to diminish my worth. Like, I can't challenge authority. I can't radiate fully. So we do that in the second part. Then let's see, remember, reclaim, relate is the third piece. So that's being in this work together, reflecting each other, being held, being witnessed, sharing our stories. And I really hold this container as one of co-learning. So no one is arrived in this work. And if anyone is telling you they are, then, run the other way.
Yeah.
Unless they're levitating, I don't believe it. But anyway, so we're in practice together. So there's a lot of time for sharing and being seen, extending from our authenticity and feeling the shakiness that might come forward when we do that, and also being validated for our gifts. And then the last piece is release. So what are we letting go of? What are we composting? What are we in the practice of dropping over and over again? Because we will inevitably pick it back up, and that's not a problem. When we see we're in those old patterns again, it's okay. We just let it go again and over and over. Yeah. Should I show the?
I think what's most important is that people have been able to see the URL here. So I'll say it again for the podcast. It's kelseyblackwell.com/decolonize-the-body-open. And we'll put that link in the show notes. We'll also have it below the YouTube video for the YouTubers out there. But I just can't speak highly enough about this program. And I think it's also maybe important to say before we switch a little bit, why is it so important for women of color to do this work together without the presence of white women?
Yeah. Well,
No.
I think our bodies know this. When we are in spaces with white bodies, even white bodies who are doing racial justice, racial awareness work, there's a protective shaping that shows up that is wise but doesn't always allow the parts of us that don't present a certain way, the parts of us that are a little bit messy, the parts of us that are a little angry, those parts of us might be held back when we're in this shaping, because what we're doing is we're protecting for potential harm that could happen. So when we're in a space with BIPOC bodies, what we're doing is we're giving ourselves an opportunity to drop that defensive shaping. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that all BIPOC spaces are safe spaces. I don't believe in safe spaces, but the intention is to create a safer space, mm-hmm. and perhaps a space that is rare to our soma, is rare to our body, mm-hmm. In which we can learn in a different way. So that is the intention. And that is a big emphasis in my work in general, is to be in these spaces with BIPOC bodies.
Yeah. I do want to say we've been talking in a very binary gendered way. And I wish that I had spoken about this earlier on.
Yeah.
But, I would love for you to just address quickly gender non-conforming folks and what you identify as woman in this space.
Yeah, so all women and femme-identified bodies. I am queer. I work a lot with queer bodies. Yeah, so that's the invitation. The history of this gathering is that it tends to attract folks who are both identify as women and folks who identify as non-binary. So, and I think that's just based on how I present, but that's the space that I'm calling in. Yeah.
Great. And what's your email if somebody wants to email you directly?
Kelsey, Kelsey, at kelseyblackwell.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd say reach directly out to Kelsey if you're curious. If you're a white woman or white person who has heard this discussion and thinks, I need something similar, send me an email at gretchen@gretchenwegner.com. The work would look different from our context. But I can hook you up with some resources related to that. Kelsey, so I just would love to end. I'm going to make my recommendation to any educators or parents or students listening. And then if you have a different one, you can make yours. Or if you just want to underscore what I say, that's fine too.
Great.
But I just came from a conference for parents and educators. And the theme every year, the theme every year is heal thyself first. And so parents, mothers, and teachers, whenever there can be an opportunity for you, when you notice some body data and have some spaciousness to actually make a decision about whether you're going to listen to it, like take a nap or not, or whatever the thing is, to go ahead and experiment with giving your sweet animal body what it needs, if you can in that moment. Give it to yourself and then speak out loud to the young people in your life about what that decision-making process was like for you, how you noticed this moment. You could have gone one way, you could have gone to this other way, not listening to your body. You chose to listen to your body, and you are experimenting more and more with what that's like in your life. That really helps students with their metacognition to hear your thinking and choice making, and then you're also modeling the difficulty and then the possibility of being able to make healthier and more body-friendly choices.
Oh, beautiful. Yes. Yeah. That slowing down to just feel what's happening in the body. I think what I would add to that is to just take one moment in your day to feel what's supporting you in a physical sense. Feel your legs on the ground. Feel your booty in your seat. And as you feel what's supporting you, in that moment, can you give more of yourself over to that support? Once a day.
I'm very moved by that suggestion in this particular moment, because of how I'm learning to sit on all my new furniture that I bought to be body friendly and to give myself over more to that support.
Give yourself over.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That was a jam-packed conversation, and I'm so thrilled you hung in to the very end. I hope you're walking away with, at the very least, some interesting ideas to chew on, and maybe even a practice or two that you can weave into your daily and weekly life. I know I have. I also want to let you know that throughout the rest of this year, I am going to be continuing to unpack this idea of colonization and decolonization. I know they are big words, and I want to really understand what's going on underneath them so I can continue to develop my practice and help also support educators do the same thing, help students actually take what is good and leave what is not so good from their experiences with schools and schooling. And I invite you along on the journey. If you want more of this, please like, subscribe, hit the little bell, follow me here on YouTube. And if you want to actually learn more about what it means to be an anti-boring educator, check out my website, gretchenwegner.com. You can even hang out with me live. I have a free office hours once a month. You can go to gretchenwegner.com/live, and I'll see you next week on YouTube.